everybody. This is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. Today, I am so pleased to welcome our guest. It's Dr. Anna Tavis, who's a prominent thought leader in the evolving landscape of work, focusing on human capital management, the future of work, and the integration of technology in HR practices. As a clinical professor and chair of the Human Capital Management Department at NYU's School of Professional Studies, she spearheads programs that delve into human capital analytics, technology, and executive coaching. She's also the author of several management books, including Humans at Work, and her most recent book, The Digital Coaching Revolution. And of course, she also is a very frequent contributor to Harvard Business Review. I'm out of breath already, Anna. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bob. This is quite an introduction. Really grateful. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you so much. We've gotten to know each other over the past few months, and the more I've learned about your work, I'm like, I've got to get this lady on the podcast so you can share with our listeners everything that your research has been leading you to. So the theme for today is going to really kind of be built around your journey towards kind of helping people better understand state of the art with coaching and technology. And so I guess just starting with that, what inspired your interest in this topic?
You know, Bob, I took a kind of sabbatical from academia and spent about 15 years working in the senior talent roles in executive development, learning and development, talent management, and Fortune 50 companies in Europe and here in the US, with the focus on definitely developing the skills, but mostly working at the executive level and thinking strategically about workforce planning, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the experiences that I went through was kind of the big realization on how unscalable some of our core and most expensive solutions were. Of course, it was absolutely, a privilege to be working with senior executives, take them on retreats, expose them to the thought leaders, fly, Ivy League professors around the world to deliver lectures, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, as most of the colleagues of ours who work in organizations, we know very well that it's just scratching the surface, if even that. And by the time we get to the executives, it's almost like too late to make any significant changes in their worldview and, in how they run their organizations. They already have a muscle memory of going through the motions of, promotions and, doing their management business by the time they get to the executive level. And we start intervening with executive coaching and these white glove managed executive programs. So, as somebody who's been always focused on the entirety of the ecosystem of the organization, when I started to realize the power and the significance of the tools that are coming in on the horizon and their ability to actually democratize the solutions that we've been, honing in on for quite some time, that's where I really became excited and dedicated my time and energy into kind of pursuing that level of research, connecting with the right right companies that are investing in product development and service development in that business. And I also started to realize the impact that the earlier pilots of these technologies in the organizations are beginning to have. I think it is a real revolution, transformation of how we manage people in organizations.
So that's a great setup. And as an executive coach, just completely concur with you that it's not scalable in a one-to-one environment. As you say, it's also kind of a privileged benefit for just a certain few. And then the issue becomes, how does that actually cascade through an organization, because the organization is much broader and larger than just their top senior leadership team. So I would agree with you that, the technology is finally at a place that's going to allow for this. Maybe one question, though, is technology is an enabler, right? It's not a solution unto itself. It's an enabler. So how do you also, maybe this is first base, it's just best principles around coaching itself and development of people to help them reach their potential. And I really like what you said. I hadn't thought of it quite this way before all that muscle memory is built, right? Practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes really perfect. And so what are some of those skills that you think would be, from a content perspective, before it even gets to the technology piece, would be incumbent in a really first-class solution?
Yes. So this is a really, really good question. The most formative time, if you think about the impact on how your kind of mental model and the view of managing your career and how you operate in an organization, a social skill set that needs to be developed in addition to the technical skills that you could just learn in certificates and other types of credentialing programs. It's the social portfolio of skills that oftentimes is lacking for people everywhere from career search or job search to onboarding process to your initial first performance review, etc. This is where having an empathetic and understanding sort of counterpart to what you are trying to process, reflect on, etc., and getting feedback is most critical and important. And I think, and you are a very skilled coach, and you know that a good coach is not a tutor, is not an advisor who tells you exactly what to do. It's really a self-discovery that happens through a series of questions, ability to provide people with some external data on what they might look like in presentations situations, in interview situations, etc. Those situations are pretty formulaic oftentimes. Mm-hmm. So to give people an opportunity to practice, get feedback, improve, and iterate before they actually go and into that milestone situation, like your final job interview or your first performance review. So that's what these tools are about. They're not the executive level coaching situation where you are handling complex strategic situation. Oftentimes people need just a listening ear or initial feedback. In fact, the more they see themselves like in the mirror reflected, and they can make a lot of incremental changes themselves. And so that technology wasn't available to people, and now it is. So when we talk about introducing AI and other types of coaching technologies, they're becoming more sophisticated, and we can talk about it. But initially, just that very basic level of coaching proves to be at scale very, very effective. And the return on investment, because you could provide it with all of your new hires, right? To all of your new hires who are going, could be hundreds for a Fortune 50 company going in at different times and in different locations, et cetera, that could be customized, trained on the policies of your company, et cetera, so that you don't have to have a live HR person showing up with big files telling you, what page you need to be looking for your PTO or other types of policies. I remember my onboarding situations where I had to sit through hours of those presentations. Totally unnecessary. AI can scan through your entire policy, could be trained on it, and you could spend the face-to-face time with the HR manager who's doing the onboarding, doing more soft skills. And again, that's a wrong term, but more person-to-person human type of initiation into the culture, as opposed to going through the policy manual.
No, gosh, couple points among many. One is the last thing you're talking about, which is if you kind of think about like a pyramid of skills, this very kind of commoditized, if I could use that term, this applies to everybody, right? This isn't personalized to Anna or personalized to Bob. These are our policies, or these are just good management practices, right? As a new leader, learn how to lead with questions, not just delivering answers, and just, as you say, kind of creating some mental models for people where they have none. So you've got a blank slate and you can kind of work on that. And then as you go up the pyramid, it does become much more personalized to the situation or the individual. Secondly, you were talking a minute ago about the ability to actually interact with these tools. And the way I say it a little colloquially is, I'd rather, fall down in my driveway than out in the street. So let's practice some of these things with my executive clients who are interviewing, like just using the functionality in ChatGPT to talk to it and say, hey, I'm interviewing for this SVP role of this at this company. Here's a little bit more data about them. Here's the job description. What are 10 questions I should expect? And I'd like to practice my answers with you. There is so much benefit to hearing actually those words come out of your mouth. Where do you stumble, right? But also having a knowledgeable listener, right? Not just your friend or somebody's going to say, hey, that was amazing, Anna, way to go. It's like, very good answer, Anna. You did X, Y, and Z really well. Sources of improvement are 1, 2, and 3. So not only are they telling you, you're giving you candid feedback, but it's quality feedback, but all in the context of being able to have practiced before game day and watching the results in people and their confidence skyrocket, because now they're relaxed because they feel properly prepared. And it's all on the back of something that's available to everybody in ChatGPT, just to name one tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And on top of that, by the time, Bob, these people arrive in the executive roles, and obviously this is so new that you have not gotten those yet, but they're coming up. They're so understanding of the whole coaching process that your job is going to be much easier, and you can take them to a very different level of effectiveness in the executive coaching process, because you don't have to do the basics. Again, to the point that I made earlier, that by the time we get them at the executive level, they're far gone. Oftentimes it's very rare. And I've seen it because I managed executive coaching assignments, and I saw how many of those were not effective and even derailed. By that time, they have those coaching skills. We know that they know what coaching means. They know how to take full advantage of coaching. And as you know, as you are going to be meeting with your client once a week, once a month, all the time in between could be spent in practice
Exactly.
with the assistant of the custom-built AI. And obviously, you're talking about ChatGPT. It does have that quality, but there are now much more fine-tuned tools that allow for, a real coaching experience. Again, trained on the material based in your organization, your leadership values, your mission and strategy, et cetera, et cetera. All of that information is blended in as you are getting a response from that AI coach who are you interacting in. And it doesn't mean that Bob's job is going away. On the contrary, the human to human moment of truth is going to be absolutely critical, but it will come on the back and with a foundation of a lot of preparation, a lot of awareness, a lot of self-awareness and hard work by the time they arrive in your office.
Yeah. And so side note, that what you just talked about, because that is the fear that so many people have, the AI is going to take my job away. And no, it's going to allow you to do things that are uniquely human. that computers were never designed to do, nor will be able to do. And I think you were talking about soft skills. Our mutual friend Johnny Taylor at SHRM calls them power skills,
Yes.
which I think is such a great term because they really are the power skills. Going back to, I want to talk about some of the tools and how these things interact with human coaching, like what's the integration of these things. But as you talked about the democratization of coaching and the ability to kind of really let that flow through the entire organization, not just reside at the top level, are there, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary use cases that your research has identified that will have the most impact the soonest?
Yes, what we've seen, again, for example, the AI native coaching companies, Valence. There are a lot of companies that kind of started out as platforms connecting people, coaches, human coaches, with going through the assessment process, defining who the right match might be, et cetera, more kind of a matching exercise. What we're seeing now more and more, there are platforms that are AI native. So no human coaches involved, although human coaches are integrating these tools as a support systems for their process. So what we are seeing is where companies invest first in a majority of cases is at the middle management level. So there, obviously, it could be taken all the way to, as I mentioned, to the onboarding process, et cetera. But the best case scenarios that I'm seeing is where these tools are used to help middle managers, because there's like a crisis of middle management, right? Middle managers are squeezed. Now they're expected to manage, to be strategic, to be coaching, et cetera, at the same time deliver performance and be supervisors, et cetera. So what we've seen is used at the middle management level, the impact is most effective. And I give you an example. In fact, I just wrote a chapter on uses of AI coaching embedded in performance management process. Imagine a performance management process where at most, initially it was just once a year. You meet with your manager and the manager tells you everything that you did right or wrong for that reason. And it's kind of backward looking process that kind of slaps the rating on you, and that determines your entire next year compensation, your promotion, your entire life depends on that. And so that was a very disempowering process. And we've seen, how much people hated the process. Imagine the process. And I actually did a lot of a deeper dive into what Microsoft is doing as they're building these AI co-pilots into the performance management process, where employees are actually getting feedback through data, because obviously it applies to people who are working in technology most of the time, right? So there are a lot of data that are available to people to actually understand where they stand on the performance, on the goals, et cetera, just in time, without necessarily managers coming in and telling them where they stand. So the data are available to both employees and managers continuously, not just at the end of the year where there's a recency bias. What you've done for me yesterday is obviously big on my horizon, and what you did in January when the whole thing started is already forgotten, even though that was a real big impact on the company, et cetera. This way, it kind of balances out the feedback, as you can really know exactly where you stand every day of the process. The other thing is there are touch points where you come to a meeting with a manager, and that's where both the manager and the employee are prepared. They have the data and they actually can practice conversations. Let's say, remember, Bob, how many training sessions we had on difficult conversations,
yes.
right? There was a whole industry of training managers of difficult conversations. Imagine that difficult conversation can happen just in time. I'm going in to see Bob. I know I didn't deliver this year because of XYZ factors. And both I'm preparing to explain what happened, and Bob, you as a manager, you are preparing to have a conversation with me in an empathetic and actually legal way. Because that's another issue, right? If I am like, your employee was, on disability for 3 months, et cetera, et cetera. Such a sensitive topic. And most managers have no idea of how to approach it. So you have all of the support of the system, the policies, et cetera, and you can receive a feedback on how you're going to approach this conversation. And as an employee, I'm ready to come in with data and say, look, Bob, it may seem that I didn't really do this, but I took this risk and this risk and this risk. And eventually, that's really where the innovation for the company will come from, even though I happen to fail this time around. And so your assessment of what I did as a performance could be 180-degree different, because you will see that I stayed late every night because I was putting in all of this time, but I didn't meet my goals because the task was so challenging, right? And impossible to get. So building this into the performance management process, not just coaching for coaching's sake, let's just go, take time off and go on a retreat, etc. But in the flow of work, as these tools are going to help us better understand, change our behavior, put in more effort, seek help, and have the support system. And from the research we're doing, we know that people actually trust these tools more than they would go and tell the manager, I don't really know how to do it. They're not going to go to a human manager and say, I'm struggling here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, with this particular task. You can go back and forth with your AI coach in the privacy of that, a relationship, and at least get some solutions where when you finally make it to the manager's office, you're going to say, here's how I'm thinking about it. I have X, Y, Z, options here. I need you to help me make the right one. But you're not coming in clueless, right? I have no idea. I'm overwhelmed. The stress level goes up. These are kind of just reality situations that we're seeing happening everywhere right now. Tools are being brought in.
Picking up on that last point, Anna, personally, I get a tremendous amount of value out of interacting and debating an idea and bouncing it off. And, I think of it not as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. It's like helping me actually think better, more completely. One of the things I regularly tell it is, I'm not looking to be validated. So please tell me where there's holes in my logic. Tell me what I'm not thinking about. It's like, well, Bob, you're doing a really good job on 75% of it. The other 25 you might want to give more consideration to is XYZ. I'm like, hadn't even thought about that. That is so valuable to me. But then your point, particularly like in a manager boss kind of a relationship where there's fear of being vulnerable. Like, I'm not really sure what to do next. And it's like, well, I guess that's because you're not very good at your job. You're now a low performer. See you later. Versus being able to tell the truth to this thing that's not judging you and has a body of knowledge to be able to, ingest what you're trying to work on and provide quality feedback, all with tons of privacy, right? And the ability to your earlier point, think through before the moment of truth, instead of just being in that meeting going, oh crap, hadn't really thought about this. So I think there's so much value in that.
Hey friends, Marnie Robbins here, host of Vibe Makers, a podcast now on the Work Defined Network. Look, we all know workplace culture doesn't come from a slide deck. Gross. It comes from people. So on Vibe Makers, I talk to the folks shaping the experience of work from the inside out. You know, the HR and people ops folk, founders, leaders, and misfits building culture through small bets, big beliefs, and a whole lot of trial and error. No fluff. Well, maybe a little fluff, but mainly just candid talk about what happens when you stop duct taping your culture together. Come check us out. Listen to Vibe Makers wherever you get your podcasts.
I want to go back to middle management for a minute, because that's something you and I have talked about before, and is a hot button issue for me. I think companies are going way overboard on, quote, flattening out middle management. How does a company, who says, oh my gosh, I listened to this podcast with Dr. Tavis from NYU. AI sounds amazing, could do so much to help in our people management. All the more reason we can thin out middle management, because the tool can carry more of that load for us. What's the fallacy in that kind of logic?
I think this is a fast and wrong decision. Break things and think about what the impact is. It seems like humans will be replaced by these tools, but to your earlier point, it's augmentation. Yeah. Where managers will need to focus most, and that's a big transition that every company right now is very far behind in accomplishing, is figuring out how humans will be collaborating, cooperating, and working in a hybrid environments with agents, with AI, with on the teams where, a robot or an agent will be a team member. So the manager role needs to change from, yes, some of those responsibilities that they've never been actually good at, as to coaching people, right? The manager has never done. If they think that that's, this is because AI can do those tasks or become coaches, that managers are now redundant. No, the managers never had the time for that. So now the big transition will be on the human side, not on the technology side. How do we create working environments that are effective, where humans and machines, or AI, I don't even think they are machines, they're like alternative agents, can collaborate, how work design is going to look like. Because and the whole kind of org design comes into question. I think thinking of at the team level, at the organizational level, department level, that's where a lot of thinking needs to be done. And it's a big, big gap, because we still think as a unit of measure, as one individual employee and one manager, and how that relationship is changing, and it will change. But what I think we're overlooking, understandably, because it's just moving so fast, is thinking at the team level and thinking at the organizational level. That strategic workforce planning, at NYU we have a course, strategic workforce planning. Workforce now is blended. It's going to be AI agents and all kinds of robots that are going to come in. So what we've done around skill sets from the purely human perspective now needs to be rethought and reconfigured, given these hybrid environments we're going to live in. And it's a human manager who's going to have to get that resolved.
Yeah, so the workforce piece is really interesting, right? Because that requires deconstructing the tasks that are getting done. I think we'll see less reliance on titles, right? And just purely functional responsibilities. To your point about agents are going to be able to pick up some of this stuff, right? And so that's not something that a human being needs to do anymore. And I think there's like you said, it's moving very fast, but there's a whole new discipline that's going to emerge of just basically work, and then by extension, workforce management, as how all this stuff even gets done. So let's just kind of placehold that for a second. Then the kind of one of the conclusions is that allows the manager to spend more time with his or her people doing the uniquely human things. Then kind of how skilled are you in that? Because your main value proposition may actually be your proficiency in doing the work. So I see the AI piece from a teach me how to be a better people manager. This is not what I went to school for, right? I've kind of picked up some things to your original point, and some of those may just be calcified things that I learned, maybe not from the best teacher 25 years ago in my career, not a best practice. And even if it was in that culture, it's certainly not here. So just kind of watching the whole thing kind of explode and then see how it all kind of gets reassembled. That's why I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, I think where we're at right now is asking the right questions, and even applied research that we're doing, at NYU, looking at across the board different companies. But I think every company is trying to wrestle with what kind of resources they would need to figure out their future in their workforce, strategic workforce plan. Because only a couple of years ago, we were only looking at humans. We kind of divided what humans do into the skill sets and saying these skills are going to be automated, but we didn't think about agents yet. Agents is kind of the 2024 phenomenon that is now playing a huge role. Yes. And, another aspect of it, what you're saying, is very relevant to what I do, because I'm in professional education, and I think L&D departments will totally need to be transformed in that sense of what are they training for, and I think involving technology into the training and thinking and scenario planning process is going to be a step toward the solution. One of the things I'm watching for, Bob, is the application of what I call digital twins in strategic workforce planning and the designs of organizations and teams, because, just a little bit of a detour into where digital twins come from. At the time of the early digitization, it came from manufacturing, where GE, for example, was very much into it. IBM designing digital twins of, let's say, GE airline engines, right? So instead of, how the innovation happened, instead of actually do it in prototype, you experiment with different digital twins of that particular engine. And you finally play out with all of the gaps that might occur or defaults, et cetera. So now with AI tools, we are able to reconstruct the whole image of a team or even organization, and play out scenarios in those digital environments before we actually go and execute the same, let's say, design model on organization, like restructuring, or mergers, or like take mergers and acquisitions, right? How do we, we used to have, Accenture come in and tell you, and you remember on the HR side, we always complained that humans were the last ones to be considered in the M&A process. At first, the attorneys, then the finance people, et cetera, and then, oops, we forgot about the culture. Now, as we're going to be thinking more about designs at those levels in the organization, we're going to be able to plug in those inputs early on in the M&A consideration, so that we can see the various scenarios. We used to do scenarios more in the analog world, but now in the digital world, much faster, many more scenarios. Then we will see what actually works out for us best. And so I think we're going to see various types of technologies coming in. And that is kind of the digital twin, is an opportunity for you to get feedback to the entire organization. It's like you are coaching the entire organization. You're coaching your executive team to be thinking in strategic terms by providing feedback in this digital environment or AI environment.
That is such an interesting concept. I haven't thought about that before, but being able to almost do like a Monte Carlo simulation where you can just do all of these potential outcomes. What are the probabilities associated with those? What are the um, unintended consequences that maybe we hadn't thought about? So that you can, again, nobody can read the future, including AI, but at least you've got this quick, not super expensive way of like how can we rapidly examine different alternatives and ways that we might go. Again, risk rate them. What are the benefits we expect from this? What are the costs of doing this? What are the unintended consequences? That's really, really powerful to be able to help bring all of that together instead of, as you say, kind of this sequential kind of way of looking at things, which feels really analog, even saying that.
Yeah. And also, Bob, if you think about the volatility that we're living through even right now, this minute, to tweak around your digital scenarios is so much faster than try to actually do something in real life or any type of prototype. So you might want to play out, multiple outcomes of the situation that your company is in and the supply chain and everything else.
Right.
And the beauty of doing it also in this kind of AI intelligence environment is that it takes into consideration the cultural aspects, multiple data points from financial markets and again your supply chain, your workforce situation, your labor laws, your taxation system, all of those amazingly complex inputs could be put in, and you're getting multiple outcomes that you can work with in a matter of minutes.
Well, another thing that strikes me as being a huge benefit of this is dialing out biases, dialing out who's the loudest voice in the room, kinds of things. So someone without a lot of political power may surface a really important concern, but he or she does have the political capital to really advocate for that position versus this, tool or system, however you want to think about that, that we're all kind of agreeing we're going to use to help guide our decision making. And so it kind of, I think, just lends more objectivity to
Yeah.
it. Well, as I say, kind of dialing out biases. Well, we tried that before, it didn't work. Or again, somebody doesn't have political capital.
I totally agree with you because I think there's been a lot of spotlight on biases and how these systems could be biased because the engineers programmed them a certain way. Guess what? You can weed out all of those biases by just bringing them out and saying, what are the biases you are trying to, bring out to our conversation? And you will see, it's an interesting and kind of funny exercise because you will see how the system itself that's supposed to be, and it has no kind of stake in, sticking with their bias as opposed to the humans. Because try to point out a bias to a human, you're going to have the whole political explosion in your organization. But with a bot, it will just politely apologize and say, like, sorry, you are right. Let me try it another way. So I think this is an iterative process because when people bring this out to me, the bot is hallucinating, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, because all you were going to do with the bot is copy and paste. No, you engage, you iterate, you challenge. And you surface all of those biases. To your point, I think it's actually an easier way to stay bias free than if you are in a politically charged human environment.
Well, you make a great point because the idea isn't how do I delegate my decision making to the machine. That there was never the right use case for this. Right. So it's like, no, this is just trying to improve our thinking. Are we going to go fact check things and like continue to? Of course we are. But to just like, I'm going to cede all intellectual responsibility to the machine. I'm not sure I need you then if that's what you're going to do with this. Let me ask you this. What are some of the ethical concerns either you've got or you've heard CHROs or other executives raise when you're talking about bringing AI into this L&D environment?
Yeah, I think these are obviously top of mind questions for most companies. Number one, definitely the privacy and intellectual property, protection for enterprises, for companies. Obviously, they don't want the bots to be trained on their proprietary data. And I think most of the providers have developed a pretty stringent protocols. So when you're signing, that's another set of jobs that just emerged in the legal profession, is to create those contracts with the vendors. For example, even educational organizations like NYU has a contract with Google. We're using Gemini, and we're using Notebook LM. And the contract is that Google is not training their AI on NYU proprietary data. We are using those tools, but they're not using our data to train their tools. So all of that is becoming available. I think the companies that are providing AI services and solutions are becoming well equipped and sophisticated around how to create those protections. So I think obviously in the negotiation process, every organization, and I think we need to provide HR also with a toolkit or a set of expertise, either on the team or in the legal department of the companies, and not necessarily only in IT. IT obviously is cybersecurity and all of those kinds of things. So those protocols are emerging. They're pretty robust, and I think companies are becoming more comfortable with bringing those tools on the inside.
I want to start landing the plane here. You've got a conference coming up in June. Do you mind sharing more about that, please?
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. So what we started doing right after COVID, in fact, our first conference was, masks and vaccination cards, et cetera. But now we're in the fourth year of Coaching and Technology Summit. And I started to walk that path of specifically focus, not generically on AI in the workplace. There are multiple conversations happening. But I think focusing in on the intersection of coaching and technology is giving me a foot in the door, pretty much all of the development talent and even HR solutions that we're currently offering. Because the way I see it and the way the industry evolved from being a mere matching platform between human coaches and the people in need of coaching, that democratized to a certain extent, by allowing more, availability, time-wise, et cetera, evolved from there to exclusively AI native companies. And what we evolved in doing at the conference, and it's going to happen on the 7th and 8th of July, is inviting more and more startup companies that, with the pioneers in the field, with BetterUp and Ezra and Bravely and Coach Hub and a few others, big kind of platforms, native companies. There is a whole ecosystem of AI native solutions because the barriers to entry are much lower. And what we are going to showcase at our conference is a proliferation of these tools and very, very creative solutions that are coming in. I'll just give you an example of how these coaching tools are infiltrating not just HR, but also the uses in the medical field. That's another chapter that we're opening at our conference this year for the first time, is how coaching, because of these tools, is becoming a go-to delivery solution in the health and well-being space.
Ooh.
So I was just looking at one company that providing this type of feedback to medical doctors, where there's one case study where a physician needs to deliver a cancer diagnosis to a patient, and before you just walk in to deliver bad news and the patient deals with it. This time around, the company created various psychological types and archetypes of like the anxious patient and a more kind of stoic patient, et cetera, et cetera. And the physician can actually practice delivery. And on the back end, AI is running feedback to how that message was delivered to this particular psychological type of a patient and how this particular message could be improved. As you can see, there are so many overlaps with what we're doing in organizations and what the medical profession is beginning to embrace. And I just found out that Mayo Clinic is beginning to integrate these coaching delivery methods into all of their medical modalities. So they're beginning to train medical doctors on coaching skills precisely with the help of those tools. So what you're going to see at our conference, and I hope you can make it, is going to be obviously the thought leaders, the pioneers in the field, the showcase of CEOs talking to each other about what's in front of us. You're going to have a lot of case studies because now we have an amazing array of different industries and companies, from Delta Airlines to Nestle to Coca-Cola to financial services like Prudential, using AI coaching tools in their talent management practices and L&D practices. And you're also going to meet innovators where you have a whole network of new solutions that are coming in, and they're partnering with each other. I suspect there's going to be a lot of M&As coming in because these solutions are going to own L&D, and to a large extent, this is what talent management is going to look like. Performance management, let's see where we could start coaching early on. Onboarding, the entire, value chain of HR services and support systems are going to be empowered and enabled through these types of tools. So please join us. I think the conversation is ongoing, and this is definitely a space to watch.
So July 7th, July 8th in New York at NYU's campus, right?
At NYU campus, yes.
How does one register for that?
Yep, we have a website. Obviously, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm launching a whole series of regular posts around different companies that are going to come and their solutions, as well as we're going to have a series of webinars with companies that are implementing those types of tools, including in the health and well-being space.
Awesome. So we'll make sure to put in the show notes the registration link. So just make it really, really easy for folks. What's the one thing that you hope people take away from this conversation today?
I hope that people are just going to start using those tools. You and I had a little conversation before we started this, that we're already doing it. It's easy. It's not a tech issue. It really is. The only barrier there is, even if you don't want to pay, even the free option is available to you, but you are going to get a sense of what it might look like for yourself. And it's a huge accelerator of your own skills, of your own understanding of where technology is going. And it just takes away the fear of what might come, because I think this is what everyone is thinking about. Well, is it going to replace me? Is it going to take away my job? It will if you're not going to start using it now.
So to go back to my friend Johnny Taylor, that's what he says. AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who's good with AI is going to take your job. But honestly, the point that you just made is, I just want to echo it. Please just try the technology. It's not going to bite you. It's not going to get mad at you. You can't break it. But just starting to play with it, you're going to be like, holy cow, this is so cool. How can I learn more? It's very engaging. It's easy, as you said. And I can just tell you personally, the step change increases I've seen both in how I run my business, but how I engage with clients. Everybody benefits from it. It's so cool. And I appreciate all the pioneering work that you're doing in this. I will see you in New York in July, I promise.
Wonderful.
So I'm very much looking forward to that. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for taking a few minutes to listen. Would encourage you to get Anna's book called The Digital Coaching Revolution, as well as register for the conference. But in the meantime, Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. It was a pleasure. Thank you.